It is often said that Plato promotes communism in the Republic, the abolition of private property. It's probably not true. Very, very likely that it's just not true. What really happens in the Republic is Socrates, the character of the Republic, the protagonist, the main character, suggests that in the city he's describing, the ruling classes and the military will have all things in common, including family. Wives and children are in common, and there's no private property for them. But that doesn't mean that Plato is promoting communism. For one thing, it doesn't mean that Plato's promoting this. Maybe it's just Socrates, the character. For another thing, maybe it's not even Socrates. Maybe he's just saying it, but he doesn't really mean it, because he's saying it as part of this very elaborate conversation with Glaucon and Adeimantus, where he's trying to prove some point or inspire them to some particular way of life, the pursuit of wisdom and taking justice seriously. He's trying to inspire them to care about their communities and not just live selfishly for the rest of their lives. And as a part of this, he concocts this elaborate story of a city, Callipolis, the beautiful city. And part of that elaborate story involves the idea that the military and the ruling classes, the military and the governing class, the aristocratic class, will have everything in common. Well, maybe he's not actually recommending this as a matter of public policy. Maybe it's just a detail which is thrown in there to help inspire Glaucon and Adeimantus to get with the program and seek wisdom. More importantly, there are questions we can ask about Callipolis, such as, what's the point of this city? And is he serious about this place? The first question is very easy to answer. The point of Callipolis is as an image of the soul. The whole point of this city Socrates concocts, this Callipolis, is to draw an image of justice in the soul. And so the different classes of Callipolis, the military class, the working class, and the aristocratic governing class, these classes parallel different parts of the soul. The military parallels the spirited part of the soul, thumos. The working class parallels the bodily appetites and the desire for wisdom. The higher part of the soul, reason, the rational part of the soul, is paralleled by the class of philosopher kings in the city. So, in order to understand what the point of this holding all things in common is, it helps to keep in mind what role it serves with respect to the soul, and what lesson for my personal, spiritual understanding of life is entailed in this image of my life, which is the city which symbolizes the soul. Well, the lesson in the city seems to be that we should consider the good of others as bound up with the good of ourselves. The idea of not having private property in Callipolis for the ruling classes and the military is that they do not pursue their own self-interest at the cost of the public good. And the idea here is just to reinforce the very first, rather the second, but the very big question of the Republic from Book 2. Is justice worth it? Does justice pay off? And it does pay off. It is worth it. Justice pays, as Vlastos summarizes the Republic, Gregory Vlastos. And this whole elaborate scheme of Callipolis is just a way of it is a way of arguing that justice for the individual pays off. That when I care about the good of others and not only about the good of myself at the expense of others, this pays off. This is actually good for me. That's the main point, to not separate our idea of the good of others from the idea of the good of myself. Now, what about this other question about Callipolis? Is he serious about all this? Well, as I believe I've already said, first of all, we might ask whether Socrates himself in the Republic is serious, or whether it's just part of his his argument to Glaucon and Adeimantus that they should be just and that they should pursue wisdom, they should be good philosophers. Or maybe he is serious, but we might also ask, even if he's serious, is Plato serious? Well, there are serious questions about how serious Socrates is about Callipolis. And I will not say that there is no chance in the world that the policy prescriptions for Callipolis are meant seriously as policy prescriptions for actual cities. It may be that there is something like this idea, and perhaps there's some influence of Sparta. Socrates historically seems to have admired Sparta, and there may indeed be some preference for the abolition of private property for some classes of the city. So maybe it's not a myth that Plato promotes it. Maybe the myth is simply that it's obvious that Plato promotes the abolition of private property. But keep in mind, it might not be Plato. It might just be Socrates. It might not even be Socrates. And even if Socrates is serious when he says all this about Callipolis, none of that means that it's serious as a policy prescription for actual cities. It might just be a metaphor for the soul. Not everything is, but some things are just metaphors or aspects of the metaphor for the soul. And also one must keep in mind, even in Callipolis, it's not for everyone. It's not universal abolition of private property. It's just abolition of private property for the military and for the philosopher kings. Now finally, this is an extremely important point. In Book 8 of the Republic, in the account of the city in decline, there is a very interesting criticism of what appears to be some early form of Marxism. It is actually communism and the redistribution of wealth democratically, exactly what Marx wanted. That is the first step in the transition from a democracy in decline to a tyranny. So Book 8 of the Republic contains a very powerful, or at least a very pointed and interesting critique of communism. So I think it is a myth, simply a myth, that Plato promotes communism in the Republic. But even if I'm wrong about that, it is a myth that he clearly promotes communism in the Republic. Very little about this is clear, except the argument that justice pays. Justice is worth it for the individual.